as of the end of September, where we find ourselves with only 3 months to go in the year of 2025. So I do hope that all of you have had a good year so far as it relates to your money, number one. Everything else obviously is important as well, but if you can't tackle your money, as I always say, it's going to tackle you. Am I right? Or am I right? Am I right? Am I right? Am I right? So welcome to ASMR Money Mentor. I'm Evan Thomas, your host. If you're new to my channel, which there probably aren't too many new people, but if you are new, I like to talk about money. I ramble in an ASMR format with this hat, so people don't know who I am. Because believe it or not, there are a lot of people in your neighborhood that have done really great things with money over time, and yet you would never know it because they're not the kind of people that flash material items in your face. They don't have fancy cars. They don't take fancy vacations. They typically don't wear fancy clothes. They don't have an outward, stereotypical wealth appearance for most millionaires in this country and others as well. They're under the radar. You wouldn't even know that they may live next door to you. For example, I live in a 600 square foot condo. All my life, I've driven cars for at least 10 to 15 years. I don't wear fancy clothes, although you will see I'm a little bit dressed up right now because I'm heading to Texas tomorrow for my nephew's wedding. I think I told you about that. I told you about that. I told you about that before. So this is what I'm gonna wear. I forget what the theme is, but I was told to wear a white or cream shirt with a dark brown tie and brown pants, all of which I had. So I had to spend $0 for my wardrobe for this wedding. I will be there for about 1 week, and then I will come back to Florida. And by the way, I am amazed, as I said last time, and even now, the hurricanes that are forming in the not the Gulf, but over, on the east side where they usually come from, are all going east. Have you noticed that? Gabrielle disappeared. And then the other ones, I can't remember their names because they were not significant to me. There's something brewing right now. Imelda, I think is her name, in the Bahamas. And yet, they are not threatening the state of Florida, so I hope that that trend continues. So all systems go right now for me to fly to Texas tomorrow. The 7-day forecast doesn't really have any other hurricanes coming, so I should make it back just fine as well after about a week. Now who knows what October will bring. And hurricane season does not end until the end of November, but typically we don't get many hurricanes in November, so I am pleasantly surprised, very happy that I was able to go on my cruise last week to Cozumel, which, by the way, I didn't buy any expensive jewelry or eye cream or anything like that this time. I did very well, unlike in February. But I'm really amazed that Mother Nature so far is being really good as far as the hurricanes. So again, let's see what happens for the rest of the hurricane season. So yeah, I'm all dressed up. I thought this would make nice ASMR. People like cloth sounds, I think. Benny Hill from Marriage, Kids, and Money just dropped a short that I watched recently. I don't follow him really closely, however, I was on YouTube looking around, and he said that he believes, as well as others, that it really should be a 5% rule. So if you have $1 million, rather than pulling $40,000, your $1 million could sustain withdrawals of $50,000 per year for about 30 years into the future. This is huge, and I don't honestly understand how they came up with it, because from everything I've been reading in recent years is that the next 10 years for projections of the stock market is that it won't be as great as the previous decade. So go figure. I don't get it, but I will take it as a gift. I did buy, Bill Bagan has a new book called A Richer Retirement. I read it on the cruise. I fully intended on reading every page. However, just like other financial books that I've read, they lose me sometimes because they go down these rabbit holes of statistics and numbers that bore me to tears. I love numbers, but give me a break. But I think it's good because he's proving his case. But I just wanted to know, is that truly sustainable for a 5% withdrawal? Anyway, I'll probably go back and read more of the book. But there is one thing that I wanted to share with you that I got out of reading A Richer Retirement, and that is this. In the very first paragraph, I think, I'd have to go back and look, the first few pages of the book, he says that anybody that has like a 2 or 3% withdrawal rate, this book is not for you. In other words, a 2 or 3% withdrawal rate means that your money can last 50 years or more. You don't have to be concerned about it, right? And I thought about that, and I wanted to share with you one of my philosophies of building wealth for all of you, because you're building wealth right now. I don't know if you're 30 years old or 40 or 50. It doesn't matter, but I think the one thing that you should be thinking about and where you should position yourself in the future is to always err on the side of investing as much as you possibly can. Try to get to a point where the engine that you're creating, remember the engine? That's the powerhouse that you're creating that will give you income once you decide to quit your job. The larger, the better. So, in other words, I really could sustain or pull off about 2 or 3% of my portfolio and be just fine. It's those people that get to retirement with only 500,000 or 300,000 or 200,000 or 600,000, somewhere in there, that they get nervous because they think about withdrawing numbers less than like 40,000 a year. If you keep your expenses really low and you live in areas of the country that are not the hot spots, and you choose neighborhoods that are safe but not the best neighborhoods, if you do everything that I've done and live a frugal lifestyle, it could be that you will get to those larger numbers. But say to yourself that maybe you only have $1 million, even though like right now, you guys know I have 1.5 in investable assets, maybe 1.6. But I just tell myself I have $1 million. And I've shared this with you before. It gives me great comfort in knowing that I can pull, even at 4%, 50,000 and a lot more, but I don't need it. I want it, but I don't need it. There's a very big difference in how you orchestrate your life and get to a point where you quit your job. Those of you that will quit your job when you don't have enough assets are the ones that are going to read the book, crazy things. Perhaps you might have to go into risky investments, or you might, play the market, take your money out, put it back in, take it out, trying to beat the conventional wisdom of the growth of the S&P 500 over time. Don't let yourself get into a position where you're just getting by with enough. You want more than enough, and take less from the portfolio that you built. Because again, there I am reading the book, and I realized that that book is really not for me, and that made me feel so good about what I've been able to accomplish. So, okay, switching gears a little bit, I also wanted to share a little bit with you about my cruise that I took with my friend Michael that I told you about. We are calling cruises that we'll take once or twice a year now retirement retreats. I think all of you should have somebody in your personal life right now that you designate as an accountability partner while you are growing your wealth. You're going to tell them everything about your finances. It could be a family member, it might be a friend, but it has to be somebody you know and that you trust. And you're going to tell them twice a year everything you're doing and where you are. That accountability partner is going to keep you accountable to your goals. If you don't have somebody that you confide in, most people believe that you're not going to get to where you want to be. So Michael and I came up with that idea on the boat. We were actually obsessed with topics, and we said, okay, what should we talk about on our retirement retreat cruise number 1? And we decided to talk about and debate withdrawal strategies. Because I, as you know, in a year or two or so, will eventually get to a point where I'm going to withdraw money from my investments. I've kind of done it already, as you know, because I sold some shares of my taxable account. Remember, $40,000. I'm going to do it again in January, most likely. But I started thinking, and I talked to Michael about things like, well, what do you do? Do you withdraw from the portfolio, from the winners, the stocks that do really well, or maybe the bonds? Or do you rebalance first into safer assets like bonds and then withdraw from the bonds? So that led us down a rabbit hole of discussions, which I don't know that we came to a conclusion per se, but it gave us enough to think about. So when I got back, I sat down for a couple of hours and I started thinking about it. And I wanted to share with you what I came up with. Right now, you guys know I don't need cash. What we're trying to solve for when you retire is cash flow. Where does the money come from? The $40,000 that you need, or whatever it is. It can come from so many sources. You know that I have 180 or 200,000 in short-term reserves, CDs, money markets, etc. Some people think that may be too much, but I'm okay with it because interest rates are still pretty high on savings accounts and CDs. But you may remember me saying that eventually I'll probably withdraw from my Roth IRA at Vanguard first, which is at January 1st of this year, the balance was $191,992. So just about $192,000. Well, right now it's at about $218,000, so the growth is about $26,000. So when I looked at my last statement of my Vanguard account, when it was about $192,000, it was 44% stocks, 56% bonds, because remember, the folks at Vanguard, when I was under their advisory services for 2 years, put me into safe investments because they knew I was going to be withdrawing from that account first. So currently at the $218,000 where it sits right now, even though we're at almost October, I'm not going to do this right now, but I'm just doing this as an example. The bonds to stocks is bonds 51% and stocks 49%. So let me give you the numbers. For the $192,000 where it was before, $107,000 bonds, 85,000 stocks, which was the 44.56 percentages. Right now, the bonds went up from 107 to 111. And these stocks went from 84,000 to 106, which is a greater jump than the bonds, which makes sense because stocks have done very well this year so far, as you know. So my current allocation in that Roth IRA is 51% bonds, 49% stocks, which is a 5% differential. So stocks went from 44 to 49. Bonds went from 44 to 51. Did I do that right? 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51. Wait a minute. Am I doing that right? Hold on, I'm looking at my notes. Bonds. Oh wait, I think I screwed up. Because I have them written down separately. Stocks was 44%, and it's now 49. That's a 5%. Bonds was 56, and now it went down to 51. There you go. I'm not going to edit that out because this is real-time stuff. Anyway, 5% differential. Some people think that you really don't need to rebalance if it's only 5%. Anything above 5% may be rebalanced. So, when we get to the end of this year, in 3 more months, I'm going to look at that account. Now, what's interesting is that I am not going to rebalance with the intent to pull money out of that account yet, even though I can because I'm over 59.5. I could have pulled it out anyway because I have enough contributions in that account. But anyway, I may rebalance it to get it back to the risk level that it was before. Sell some of the stocks into safer investments, meaning the bonds, by 5%. Which would then sit there and grow a little bit to be pulled later for income in the future of my retirement. Does that make sense? Now, I want to close today's episode by talking a little bit about differences in Michael's portfolio versus mine. One is not really particularly better than the other. It just is how it turned out. Michael retired a couple years before me, or about 1 year before me. He has a 401k, and he's balanced at 60% stocks, 40% bonds, so that's all he has to worry about. When he starts withdrawing from his 401k, which I think he plans on keeping it there, although he may move it to a traditional IRA at some point into the future, but because he's using the rule of 55, he's not quite 59.5 yet. I think he's going to keep it there for now. Anyway, my situation is different, you guys, remember? In other words, if he looks at his asset allocation, he only has to worry about 60-40 out of that one account. My situation is different. Remember, I've got 2 Roth IRAs, both of which are very similar in asset allocation. The one with Fidelity is a little bit more risky, not by much though. It's in a target fund 2030, so it will naturally go into bonds and rebalance itself over time, and I love that because I probably won't need that account way beyond even those 5 years. Then my traditional IRA, which is kind of like the equivalent of his pre-tax 401k, is 85% stocks, 15% bonds, but I don't need that money for 15 years or more into the future. So I can either look at the asset allocation of all of my money, which is 75-25, big deal, but I'm looking at it. I mean, most people would say, well, that's too risky, but remember, I'm using those accounts at different points in the next 30 years, maybe 40 years, right? However, as we go, you know that those accounts are in target funds, so they will naturally become more conservative, but I may pull a trigger and move them into safer investments just based on whatever happens in the stock market. For example, if by the end of 2026 I see that they're saying that the market may go down, I may pull the trigger and move it into safer investments to capture some of the gains. I don't know. I'm not sure, but right now Goldman Sachs and others are saying that 2026 should also be another good year, so I'm not going to worry about short-term volatility. I have a bigger range of vision, and I will then make those changes based on what the market does. Not that I'm a market timer. If you're building wealth, you don't want to do things like that. You just want to continue to put money in and not worry about it. But when you get to retirement, you start thinking a little bit differently. So that, I think, is what I want to leave you with today in tonight's episode. As far as I wanted to share with you tonight, and let me just go back to what I mentioned earlier. The 4% rule is now the 5% rule. That should make all of you feel really comfortable. As you continue on and you build your wealth, you might be 30 years old, you might be 35, you might be 40. I had no money at 40 years old. Here I am going to be 60 in early 2026. And I was able to amass a lot of money by being frugal, by keeping my expenses down. That is number one. That then gives you a large pad when you decide to quit your job. A want versus a need. You don't want to quit your job and go into retirement and need all of the money from the 4 or the 5%. If you told me, Evan, if I retire right now or in the future, I'm going to need every single dollar of the maximum percent that I can withdraw from my investments, you're asking for trouble. You want to have a big, wide variance in need, your critical expenses, versus wants, your discretionary spending. Remember, as I build my budget for 2026, it's going to look like, I think I'm going to bump it up to 40,000, even though it's 37 right now. That's easier to look at the numbers because it'll be about 20,000 of critical expenses and 20,000 of discretionary expenses. That's a 50% ratio, right? I could really, if I only need 20, could I go down to like a 1% withdrawal rate on 1.5 million? Yes. I think I did the numbers right. Anyway, at this point I'm rambling. I want to thank you guys for being here. If you like content like this, give me a thumbs up. I would appreciate it. If you have not subscribed, hit the subscribe button. I would appreciate it. And I will see you guys when I get back from Texas. I'll let you know how things went. And I will see you next time.